20. Is that correct, Direk? How much time you have? Okay. And just to confirm, you fixed sec babes, no? Sure, pwedeng sec babes. Welcome to Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang, your intel in the Philippine markets and the economy. In the headlines, call for accountability intensify as government unearths more inconsistencies in the DPWH flood control projects. We discuss the cost of corruption with Emmanuel Noel Leco, President and Chief Economist of the Credit Rating and Investor Services Philippines, Inc. The proposal to impose up to 300% tariffs on semiconductor chip imports to the U.S. will kill the global trade industry, says Economy Secretary Arsenio Balisacan. And the operator of NAIA justifies plans to raise the passenger service charge. Senator Panfilo Lacson reveals how politicians are getting the lion's share of funds for flood control projects in collusion with contractors and public works officials. If 100 million pesos is allocated for a project, it's not only the regular deductibles like taxes are getting slashed. Lacson said in his privileged speech, the project proponents, which usually are the politicians, DPWH officials, bids and awards committee members, the district engineering office, and the audit personnel all get a percentage in taxpayers' money. That leaves only 40% of actual funds for the project.
Corruption has been so pervasive and systemic that doing so is like a piece of cake. And when I say piece of cake, I mean that funds for a specific project are divided, shares vary depending on greed, big parts swallowed by corrupt operators, both from the public and private sectors, leaving only crumbs for actual project implementation. May ilan pa ngang proyekto, hindi man lang nagtira para sa taong bayan. Ang tawag ng Pangulong Marcos dito, guni-guni o ghost projects.
Lacson disclosed the existence of the so-called syndicate inside Bulacan's 1st District Engineering Office. Its former head, Henry Alcantara, and his successor, Bryce Hernandez, allegedly tapped their favorite contractors to implement ghost projects in the province. Based on Lacson's own analysis, the office had 28 flood control projects in 2024 with the same price tag of 72 million pesos. The senator also revealed that a lawmaker in Oriental Mindoro touted flood control projects using congressional insertions. While Lacson did not mention the politician's identity, his slide showed the name of Deputy Majority Leader Arnan Panaligan. One barangay in 2024 received 1.9 billion pesos in funds for 8 flood control projects, when the proposed budget only allocates 810 million for 3.
What gives, Mr. President? Kung saan may multimillion projects, dumadapo ang agila. Pero lubog pa rin sa baha ang nadadapuan ng agila. Isa lamang po ito sa napakaraming banners at social media posts ng congressional insertions ng mga politiko na naglipana sa iba't ibang bahagi ng bansa.
In an interview on The Big Story, Panaligan denied Lacson's allegations.
Hindi po yung opisina natin ang nagpondo ron. Hindi rin ako ang proponent ng project na yon. Hindi po ako member ng BICAM. Never na ako naging member ng BICAM. Pati yung sinasabi, small committee, hindi ako member noon. Maring doon nadadagdagan yon.
It is strike 2 for Bulacan after President Marcos found an abandoned flood control project tagged as completed. Marcos conducted yesterday, Wednesday, a surprise inspection of a 220-meter river wall in Baliwag, Bulacan, the second time in a span of 2 weeks that he saw anomalous projects up close. Bulacan has the highest number of flood control deals and, according to Senator Lacson, the most notorious when it comes to ghost ones. Marcos mulls economic sabotage raps against the contractor of the 55 million peso river wall.
As of last month, June, ang report dito, 100% complete at saka fully paid. Wala kaming makita na kahit isang hollow block, isang ng simento, walang equipment dito. Lahat itong project na ito, ghost project. Walang ginawa na trabaho dito.
I'm getting very angry.
Meanwhile, Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said the president has ordered to freeze 60 to 80 billion pesos worth of infrastructure funds in the 2025 budget. Castro said these funds are inconsistent with the government's Philippine Development Plan. These allocations would not be released until further review. But Vice President Sara Duterte is not impressed with the chief executive's anti-corruption drive. Speaking before the Filipino community in Paris, Duterte hit his former ally for probing irregularities just now, claiming Marcos is doing this to cover up his own lapses.
Nabanggit namin yon kay BBM na ganun ang ginawa, pero noon ay wala siyang reaction. Tapos bigla ngayon, meron na siyang reaction. Paniwala ko, pinaghahandaan niya lang yung excuse niya para sa susunod na baha.
The Bureau of Internal Revenue will now be joining the probe into alleged anomalous flood control projects. The agency will review the tax compliance of contractors after President Bongbong Marcos named firms that secured big-ticket contracts. BIR Commissioner Romeo Lumagi says they will coordinate with the DPWH to review contractors' records, including those tied to so-called ghost projects. He said the Bureau will request documents to verify whether firms met their tax obligations. Meanwhile, Senator Kiko Pangilinan questioned why DPWH Secretary Manuel Bonoan has not stepped down despite allegations of massive corruption. In a social media post, he described the situation as a trillion-peso robbery and called for accountability. On August 15th, former DPWH Secretary Babe Singson spoke on this program, questioning the 350 billion peso flood control budget for DPWH. He also urged the suspension of all dredging projects pending independent audit.
We have 18 master plans for all major rivers in the country, which we finished in 2016. Unfortunately, nobody touched that. No? So now the president is aware, and DPWH is trying to implement components of that. My full 6 years terms in DPWH, for flood control, I only spent 182 billion. Look at the 2025 budget with the insertion. The total for 1 year is 350 billion, just for 1 year. I'm saying I spent 182 billion for 6 years. Where did all this 350 billion go?
We speak now with the president and chief economist of Credit Rating and Investor Services Philippines, Inc. He is also fellow at the Center for People Empowerment in Governance, Emmanuel Noel Leco. Good to have you back on, Noel. Welcome to the program.
Glad to be back, and thank you for the invitation on a topic that is really very relevant these days.
Super relevant, in fact. So what do you make of what you're observing so far in the way the investigations and all the assumptions are coming along?
I think it's a great introduction to the budget deliberation that all these so-called flood control projects and the anomalies surrounding them are now discussed wide in the open. So that's good, and I hope that the investigation will come with a concrete resolution to how these trillions of projects, trillions of pesos in projects were wasted and will be avoided in the future.
Well, what is concrete at this point? What are you looking for as you're hoping for some kind of resolution?
I think we want to have to see the evidence and who are the ones involved in this web of corruption in government. This is not just the contractors, and I think hearing from the privileged speech of Senator Lacson yesterday, there is a web of participants in this syndicate, apparently, that is really organized in order to plunder the country's resources.
You know, as I was preparing for our conversation, I was drawn to a philstar.com article that came out yesterday, posted by Jean Mangalus, which says as the calls for accountability intensify, the cyclones are overwhelming communities. And the contrast raises a stark question. How much has been spent to prevent floods? And also how many lives have still been lost? So in light of the recent floods that have paralyzed much of Metro Manila in the previous month, what role do you think corruption played in exacerbating the vulnerabilities that communities now face and the impact it's had on economic resilience as a whole?
Corruption has a lot to do with it. If the flood control projects were properly implemented, properly in place, I think the damage would have been minimized. If we go back to Undoy in 2009, the estimated loss to the economy was like 11 billion pesos. And there is a study that I'm reviewing now, and it estimates that with a 20% probability that the big floods will come again, and it already did, it can cost us about 300 billion pesos to the whole economy. And remember, they're not just calling it the direct impact of the flooding, but also operational disruption to the economy. And that means logistics, that means productivity losses, that means people are not able to come to work because of the flooding.
And also the lives lost, to say the least, that really is something that you'd want to avoid in a situation like this. The multilaterals have spoken up. ADB, IMF, and the World Bank have all estimated that the cost of corruption is 20% on any given budget. Mm-hmm. Would that be right? Or could it be higher? That
will be about right, but based on what we've been hearing, what we've been following, it can be anywhere from 20%, 30%, or even 40%. From the presentations we heard, it's like only 40% of the budget allocated for infrastructure projects were left to implement the project. That is a lot. And if we go to the budget with trillions of pesos going into the capital outlay, that will cost us billions of pesos in corruption. And remember, we are borrowing to finance this project. So this is not only a direct or midterm or immediate impact, but it's going to be long-term because we're borrowing long-term to finance our projects. And not to mention the lost opportunities that the development does bring. If we do fund spurious projects, then that would also have an impact on the kind of projects we bring out there to the communities. Yes. Substandard, ghost projects even. Yes, and that would be the most obvious. Remember, the budget that is being proposed now is about 22% of the GDP. So the potential for the budget to stimulate growth in the economy is there. It's a lot. 22% of the GDP is a lot. However, if 40% of our budget is being plundered or is being wasted, we are not able to stimulate the economy with the use of the budget. So how much could that cost the economy then? We're still growing at one of the fastest in the ASEAN. We're still being called that despite what's going on here. Have you done up the numbers? Actually, being identified as the fastest growing economy, I think we have to put that in context. Remember, during the pandemic, we were one of the lowest or the slowest economy in the region. And therefore, starting from a low base,
a good 10% would just barely bring us back to the pre-COVID economic level. So I am not going to gloat on the fastest economic growth right now, but I think we have to focus more on how much of our resources are being wasted because of corruption, because of misuse, and because of, corruption is just one of the problems that we have in budgeting. The capacity, the capability of our government agencies, another problem that we have to deal with. So corruption plus the inefficiency, I think, will have to be addressed by our government.
Because it has a big impact on social services, apart from the fact that we don't really have that fiscal space. So what's the worst impact on social services if we do not address this?
Education sector right now is a major casualty here. While education is getting, I think, the biggest chunk these days, as opposed to last year, education is getting a big chunk of the budget. However, if we scrutinize the education budget, only so much is being allocated for the construction of classrooms. And we estimate that that will not leave a dent on the classroom shortage that we are seeing now. Our students, our young students are waking up very early just to be in school at 6 o'clock in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, and then go home and be squeezed in those congested classrooms. So the education deficit that we are seeing right now will have to be addressed. That's why when I was talking about the budget, we have to see a budget that will address developmental problems of the country. And number one is education, healthcare, and housing. Looking at the budget, there is not much going into those three major priorities that we should have right now.
Well, thank you so much for that context and insight, Noella. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
And Manuel Leco of Senpeg and CRISP. Well, President Marcos has joined the nation in commemorating Ninoy Aquino Day today, August 21st. In a statement, the president said the occasion highlights a chapter in the country's history that continues to echo across generations. He also said the passage of time allows Filipinos to reflect with greater clarity, seeing history less as judgment and more as instruction on civic duty. Marcos also pointed out the day serves as an invitation to govern with sobriety, conscience, and foresight. The president stressed the republic is ready to uphold leadership rooted in peace, reconciliation, and dignity beyond differences. He closed his message by wishing Filipinos a solemn and meaningful remembrance. You are watching Money Talks. Coming right up, the Economy Secretary says the proposed 300% tariffs on semiconductor chips will kill global trade. Keep it here on One News. Welcome back to Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang. Calls for accountability intensify as government looks into DPWH flood control projects. Joining us today is DPWH Secretary Manuel Bonoan. Good to have you on, Sec Manny. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Cathy. Good morning po to our listeners.
So how are you holding up, sir, as the Senate investigations carry on?
Well, yes, it's still going on, and I think there are things that we need to undertake in this process. Anyway,
Which one, sir?
we continue actually the investigations that we're undertaking in areas where there seems to be some problems, issues, and as directed also by the President, we have to continue our investigations, particularly in the Bulacan area.
Well, Secretary Babe Singson is asking where the former secretary himself is asking where the 350 billion pesos went. What has your agency validated so far, and what you've confirmed that the Senate investigation as ghost projects?
Well, I think the 350 billion master plan that the former secretary is talking about is the master plan for the program for Metro Manila. It's not for the entire country. I have to look into that because I think what I know is actually this is the master plan that was undertaken through the World Bank. And the 351 billion would be the total cost of the projects or programs that are included into that master plan in Metro Manila.
Well, speaking of Bulacan, sir, the president said he is no longer just disappointed, he's angry at what he's seen in the province. Let's just listen to this.
Yeah, I'm sure that anybody...
Thank you.
Disappointed, sir? Yes, disappointed.
Extremely. More than disappointed. I'm getting very angry. This is what's happening.
As the investigations dig deeper in, Secretary Manny, many are just asking, how did the substandard or ghost flood control projects transpire under the DPWH's watch?
Well, I think these are the projects, this is what we are trying to unearth. Actually, how did it happen? Because notwithstanding the many supervision protocols in the implementation of this project, meron pa rin mga nangyayaring ganito. I really expect. And I think this is a very isolated case naman, mostly in the Bulacan, in this particular engineering district in Bulacan. So we're trying to look into how did it happen, how are we involved, and everything. So we are now documenting it so that we can find all the necessary sanctions and charges that we want to be implemented.
Bakit po natin nasasabing isolated lang po yung naganap sa Bulacan or natuklasan sa Bulacan?
From the validation process that we have undertaken during the last few weeks, only in Bulacan, ito lang naman sa Bulacan ang nakikita namin na merong ganitong situation. All the rest, from the other regions and districts, I have not been given a report of a similar instance na meron mga ghost projects. No? I think there are projects that seem to have been damaged or deteriorated and things like this, but not ghost projects that we are talking about.
There's a lot of potential problem areas to consider. Nasabi niyo na nga po yung monitoring, but it could also be in flawed procurement processes or local contractor collusion. Where do you think po is the biggest issue? Where does the DPWH see the most urgent structural reform needed?
Well, I think we have to. I think we have all the supervision and implementation protocols in place, but I think they can still manage to do something like this. So I think ang importante dito is we have to set the example that anybody who has actually been involved in this should be penalized and should go sanctioned and everything, you know, so that may pakita natin that we are sincere of tinitignan natin yung portability of our people in the department, as well as actually yung pollution with contractors if there is any. Kailangan din, you've got contractors and maybe maybe other forces and yung internal force namin sa district offices and anybody, kailangan pa namin tingnan lahat.
Senator Kiko Pangilinan po posted on his social media demanding accountability. Babasahin ko lang po. Sa ganitong katinding trilyong pisong halaga ng pagnanakaw sa gobyerno sa ilalim ng Public Works, bakit hindi pa nagre-resign yung Secretary ng Public Works? Ano po ang response ninyo sa hamon ni Sen Kiko?
Well, I leave it to the President po nito. I am at the pleasure of my tenure is at the pleasure of the President also.
But how do you intend to restore public trust in the DPWH as it is?
Absolutely. I think this is what I'm trying to do because I think, let me also point out that many of the projects that we reported to have been completed are projects that were started in the previous administration. They were only reported as completed during the first few years of this administration.
All right, we'll leave it there po, and thank you so much for your time, Secretary Manny Bonoan of the DPWH. Economy Secretary Arsenio Balisacan says the U.S. president's plan to impose up to 300% tariffs on semiconductor imports would kill global trade. Trump earlier said he is planning to set tariffs on chips in the next 2 weeks, hinting rates could go to as high as 200 to 300%. Balisacan says the move is, quote, practically saying no trade, calling it prohibitive. Analysts warn the tariffs could devastate the Philippines' top export industry, which ships over $6 billion worth of electronics to the U.S. each year. They said it could cost jobs, widen the trade deficit, and weaken local chip assembly and testing. Former Trade Undersecretary Rafaelita Aldaba says the country must diversify markets and build supply chain resilience to soften the blow. A sell-off in tech stocks extended for the second straight session, dragging down most U.S. equities on Wednesday. The Nasdaq declined by 0.6%, S&P 500 tumbled nearly 0.25%, and the Dow slightly rose by less than 0.1%. As investors await for the Fed's annual Jackson Hole conference, U.S. President Trump has demanded the resignation of Fed Governor Lisa Cook over alleged mortgage fraud. Benchmark 10-year Treasury yield slightly ticked down, 4.296%. Gold prices rose, $3,343 per troy ounce. U.S. futures pointing to a decline ahead of the market open later tonight Manila time. Dow, S&P, and the Nasdaq all down by over 0.1% each. As for the Asian markets, it's off to a mixed start. Australia's ASX 200 up over 0.5%, South Korea's Kospi rising nearly 1% higher, and the Japanese Nikkei 225 down over 0.6%. The Philippine markets are closed this Thursday for Ninoy Aquino Day. PSCI ended Wednesday's session flat as Regina Capital says investors still seek fresh bargains. The broader all-shares index slid by about 0.1% with the sectoral gauges a mixed bag. As for the Philippine peso, it closed yesterday stronger, 56.96 to the dollar, while the 10-year government bond yields ticked down to 5.972% from the previous close of 5.986%. Trading resumes tomorrow, Friday. The country's balance of payments posted a $167 million deficit in July, a reversal from the $62 million surplus in the same month of last year. The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas says the shortfall came as the government tapped its foreign currency deposits to pay external debt. From January to July, the BOP stood at a $5.7 billion deficit. That compares to a $1.5 billion surplus in the same period last year and is the largest gap since May. The Bangko Sentral said the main reason is that the country still imports more goods than it exports, although the trade gap narrowed slightly this year. Steady inflows of remittances, foreign loans, and investments helped cushion the shortfall. The Securities and Exchange Commission has fined Villar Land Holdings Corp. For its failure to file financial statements on time. In an order dated August 18th, the SEC penalized Villar Land and its directors with an administrative fine of 1 million peso each, or an aggregate penalty of 12 million pesos, with an additional 2,000 pesos daily until they filed the reports. They were also served with a 10-day show cause order to explain why the firm's license should not be suspended. Among the directors listed are former Senator Manny Villar and his children, Senators Mark and Cynthia Villar. The SEC scored Villar Land for its repeated failure to file the required reports by the statutory deadline and comply with the lawful orders of the Commission. Villar Land is also facing a separate SEC probe for alleged insider trading over its 1 trillion peso valuation. The operator of the Ninoy Aquino International Airport says the planned hike in passenger service charges is allowed under its concession agreement. In a statement, Ninoy Infracorp, or NNIC, said the adjustment is not arbitrary but follows the schedule set when the concession was awarded. Passenger service charges or terminal fees are imposed on departing passengers. Domestic travelers currently pay 200 pesos, while international passengers pay 550 pesos. But starting September 14th, these will rise to 390 and 950 pesos respectively. Overseas Filipino workers will remain exempt. NNIC stressed the increase is needed to help fund the airport's modernization. But a group of lawyers and academics has challenged the hike before the Supreme Court, calling it illegal and burdensome. They argued airport fees have already surged since a private concessionaire took over last year, warning that higher costs could affect 130,000 passengers daily and worsen inflation. That is it for Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang. Catch us again tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. here on One News. We're also streamed live on YouTube and on our Facebook channels. Have a great day ahead.